Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle. And in this video, we got ourselves a good one because it is time to update the comic book index. That is right, folks. We are in May, which means I owe you numbers for April. And it's very, very interesting because we have to ask ourselves the question, have comic books found the floor? Have we actually found the bottom? Has the bleeding stopped? Well, in this video, we're going to find out together. But of course, before I get into the video, if you guys could like, comment, subscribe, I appreciate it. Helps support the channel doing those things. Also, a little bit of a warning, a little bit of a caveat. Remember, the comic book index is not a perfect system. This is just one point of data that I put together so that you guys can be informed on your comic collecting journey. Of course, you must do your own research. Don't take it from me. I mean, I find this thing helpful, and hopefully you guys do too. And shout out to Sean from Reserved Investments, who recently made a video talking about how collectible indexes are often very, very flawed. Totally understand what he was getting at. You guys should definitely go check out his video, but I do think that this information can be helpful as well, so I hope you guys find it useful. All right, what is the comic book index? Well, the comic book index is the top 100 sold books per age, silver, bronze, and copper. I take the highest volume of grade for those key books. That's the one that I actually count. I take the final sale of the month for those key books, aka the market close, and I get all of my info from GPA data. So suffice to say, if I was going to take the top 100 key books within each age that sell the most, that are the most in demand, that are the most bought and sold, how much would it cost you to buy them on a month-by-month basis over the course of these last 7 years? Well, last month, it actually cost you $42,029 for the Silver Age 100. Of course, we've been on a little bit of a downslide since earlier this year in January, where the index was actually at 46,655. But if you rewind the clock back 6 months or so, we've been going pretty steadily sideways over the course of these last few months. Well, where do we go in the month of April? Well, it turns out we had a big bounce back up, jumping up to the $45,896 range, a pretty sizable jump and the biggest one we've seen going from December to January. And while I always let you guys know that, with the Silver Age comic books, it can often be a lot more swingy. There's some bigger books in there that, tend to not sell as much. So in any given month, it can go kind of up or down in any sort of direction. But, if we kind of rewind the clock all the way back even to say July of 2023, for the most part, it kind of feels like we've basically been trading sideways. I mean, certainly there's been up months and then there's also been some down months, and maybe there will be more down months to come. But generally speaking, the thesis has sort of remained true right now, where we had to get all of the COVID money out of these comic books. We're kind of at that point now where the floor seems to be basically where it was all the way back in November of 2020. And it's been sort of my speculation and belief that, if you're somebody out there who wants to buy, say, a key Silver Age comic book, you probably should be targeting prices that are around their November 2020 price, because all of the froth was in there for so long that it's taken sort of this high interest rate macro economy to kind of get all of this money out of things like collectibles. But I will table that talking point and move on to the Bronze Age, which we have to give an update as well. Now, last month for the Bronze Age, we were at 35,397. And for one of the first times within the last 3 years, we actually saw 2 up months out of the last 3, which was pretty crazy for the Bronze Age, because the Bronze Age has been an index that definitely has been hemorrhaging value ever since the height of the market in April of 21. Well, where do we go here in the month of April? Well, we actually had another slight up month, going up to 35,816. And shockingly, this is the first time since I've been doing this index that we've had 2 up months in a row. You have to go all the way back to the explosion of comic books during the COVID boom, in early 2021 to actually see 2 consecutive up months for the Bronze Index. I mean, we've had definitely months where, the index has gone up and then it's gone sort of sideways and then it's gone down and then it's gone up again, but we've never had it to where it had 2 up months in a row. So this is actually pretty surprising to see. And so far, comic books have, been resistant at that price point of around, their November 2020 price, their October 2020 price. We've tested those waters. We've kind of gone back down to those levels. But for the most part, they seem to be holding up at this price point, at least for now. Now, the last one, of course, that we have to talk about is the Copper Age Index. Again, I always tell you guys, with the Copper Age Index, we're not really here to assume that the Copper Age produces any sort of, reliable returns. You look back from January 2018 through like December of 2020, and the graph has been pretty flat, overall. I just showed to you guys for informational purposes. purposes. But where did we go in the month of April? Well, we went, slightly down, 23,300, which was down a couple $100 from the prior month. So, you could kind of call that a push overall. But again, when you kind of line up, the Copper Age index to the Bronze Age and the Silver Age, it sort of feels like, yeah, we've been moving pretty steady. We've been going kind of sideways. I mean, certainly we have our ups and down months, but it feels like the biggest drops have already occurred. Now let's kind of go through the key takeaways here before we get into the nitty gritty and the good stuff. In the Silver Age for March of 2024, we're at $42,029 going up to $45,896, an increase of 8%. For the Bronze Age, March of 2024, $35,397 to April, $35,816, an increase of 1%. And then for the Copper Age, we were at $23,300, which was a slight decrease of about, a couple $100 or so, which we'll call that a push. Now, the key takeaways, this is where it starts to get very, very interesting. For the silver book values, we had 11% down this month, and we actually had 13% up. Now, I can't actually remember off of the top of my head, the last time that we've actually had a month where there were more ups than there were downs. But, just anecdotally, thinking about doing this index, I don't think it happens very often. So that's a very interesting sign overall. And of course, we're going to talk about, seasonality within comic books in a second. 27% non-sale, that is the same amount of non-sale factor as we actually saw last month. So that seems to be pretty, kind of even overall. It'll be interesting to see if we ever get to a point where that non-sale number actually goes down. For the Bronze book takeaways, we had 16% down, 16% up, and then a very, very small amount of non-sale, only at 8%. So pretty even Steven from the Bronze Age, which is kind of why it showed, kind of a slight up month, if not, sort of a sideways action. Now, if we jump into the month by month here, this is the one I always find very interesting to talk about. Of course, we are now looking at the purple line of 2024. It's been my speculation that our purple line over the course of the next year is probably going to look like the 2023 line, the cyan one, where, we kind of go sideways. Maybe there's a slight decrease over the course of the calendar year. But for the time being, we're kind of entering that seasonality area where usually in April and May, maybe even June sometimes, those tend to be, positive months for comic books. I mean, of course, the orange line and the cyan line have shown sort of decreases in those months. But if you go back to like 2018, 2019, 2020, and even 2021, I mean, what you generally saw was, we kind of crescendo going into, say, the tentpole movie of, the summer. This year, we're going to get Deadpool. So you have to imagine that, now that we have people excited about X-Men comic books, people are buying those up. We're going into Deadpool. People are looking to, make some purchases during the summer months. Then, towards the end of the year, we get a little bit of a lull. September, October, even November at times tends to be the lowest months for comic books, which I imagine is kind of where we'll be as well later on this year. And then December kind of, turns the corner, and then we kind of go into, the next cycle. But let's move forward now to the trend line. Of course, this trend line is not drawn to scale, so take it with a grain of salt. But, something that I noticed that is really interesting here is, the Bronze Age had been flirting with the lower end of the trend line, and eventually, we kind of started to turn this corner in these last 2 months where we've kind of been able to hold up and show some resistance on that trend line. And I just have to sort of think that, being that these are the top, 100 key Bronze Age books, Hulk 181s and Marvel Spotlight 5s and ASM 129s and all those types of books that you can kind of imagine. I mean, based on a long enough of a time horizon, just the natural rate of inflation is going to keep some of these values elevated, like no matter what the case is, right? Like even if the economy is tough, there's always going to be dealers who are swooping up and buying up this stuff. And we've kind of, hit that point where, people are willing to take flyers on these comic books and, hold up the floor, generally speaking. I mean, maybe 20 years from now, the index will crash down to zero because nobody collects comic books anymore. But at least for the short to kind of medium term, it does feel like people are at that point where the prices feel low enough that they're just willing to buy it. These are the prices that they were selling for in November of 2020 anyway. So, it doesn't feel that bad to make those purchases for a lot of people, especially a lot of dealers, which is why it kind of feels like, we're returning to the mean. I mean, we may still be in the despair phase. A lot of people talk about, sort of the macro economy, the macro environment. And, if you watch a lot of financial YouTube, you can get all different kinds of opinions. Again, I'm somebody who doesn't know the answer. I have no idea if comic books are going to go up, comic books are going to go down. There's no way to actually know or predict this stuff. I do imagine that if the entire economy, goes into a massive, massive recession, which, we've probably already been in a recession, but I digress there. But if everything crashes and the stock market goes down to zero and everything, goes to zero, then yeah, comic books are probably going to go to zero as well, because people are going to need that extra cash and they're going to have to liquidate their comic books and they're going to have to sell. And there's going to be, not enough people in the market that are going to be able to absorb it. But, for the most part, because comic books are a little more, niche, it's more of a luxury item, especially when we're talking about, the key comic books that people are spending, thousands of dollars on. I think for the most part, people are just going to hold on to these books and they're probably not going to oversell it. For the time being, we may have seen the biggest decreases that we are going to see for the values of those comic books. And, even if things get a little bit tighter, even if things get a little bit rougher, I don't know if we're going to have those sort of massive drop-offs that we saw, in 2022, because we had the massive run-up that we had in 2021. But there you have it, guys. That was the update for the comic book index for the month of April. It'll be interesting to see where we go from here. I speculate that May will also be another positive month for comic books, just due to seasonality. Again, it tends to be, from what I see, that people often buy stuff in May. So I assume that that month is going to be pretty positive as well. Again, this is not sort of financial advice. This is just to help you guys, on your collecting journey. I myself am somebody who still would rather just buy the comic book raw at discount and grade it myself if, you actually want this book. But generally speaking, if you're somebody who, wants to buy one of these key books, again, I always say to you, look at the prices that it was selling in November of 2020. And if you really want to add it to your collection, that's probably the price point you want to get it at. You want to at least start in that ballpark before you make any of those purchases. But that is all I have for this video. Let me know what you guys think. What is your outlook on the comic book market going into the summer? How have you guys been feeling about, your buying and selling journey? What do you guys suspect we're going to see in the next few months? Thank you all so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. See you on the next one.